Today, we will talk about the shocking truth about the Berlin Conference, the event that played a pivotal role in the scramble for Africa. Now imagine powerful men gathered in a lavish room in Berlin, maps spread on tables, pens scratching out borders, dividing a continent they had never truly known. No African leaders invited, no African voices heard. This was the Berlin Conference of 1884, and this is the shocking story of how Africa was carved up like a pie by European powers. Before we start, please subscribe so that you don't miss our daily uploads. Let's jump right into it. By the late 19th century, Europe was hungry for power, resources, and global dominance. Africa, with its gold, ivory, rubber, and fertile lands, became the ultimate prize. In the 1880s, Europeans held only 10% of the continent. But that changed fast. Britain, France, Germany, Belgium, Portugal, and others began an aggressive race to claim more. Speeding, rushing, competing. They built railroads, set up trading posts, and most importantly, made alliances with local rulers. Some deals were fair, some not so much, but all of this was happening without the Africans involved. Like their opinions didn't matter. It was like deciding someone's future without asking them. Then came the Berlin Conference, a meeting of world powers in 1884 and 1885. The plan was to divide Africa among them. Now, why is this so crazy? Because none of the people whose land was being discussed were invited. It was like adults playing with a toy and not even sharing it. So who were these big wigs gathered in Berlin? Let's meet the players in this story. First, we have Germany, led by Chancellor Otto von Bismarck. He hosted the whole event in Berlin. Okay. You can think of him as the homeowner throwing a party and making all the rules. Then there's Britain. At this time, they had the biggest empire in the world. Think of them as the popular kid in class who always wants more toys. France, they also had a massive empire and were ready to fight for more land in Africa. Next is Belgium. King Leopold II was in charge. He wanted his own piece of Africa, and he got more than he bargained for. Portugal showed up too, and they had been in Africa for a long time, but their empire wasn't as strong as before. Then we have Spain and Italy. These two were late to the party and didn't get as much as they wanted. The Netherlands was also there. They had colonies in South Africa, but they weren't super interested in expanding. Then there was the Ottoman Empire, Russia, the United States, and Austria-Hungary. Each of them had their reasons for being there, but they weren't as active as the others. Now, why did they hold this conference? Well, it might sound fancy and polite, but it was all about getting more power and money. The real reason, they wanted to steal as much of Africa as possible. They talked about rules and regulations, but it was all about grabbing land. As the conference started, everyone had different plans. Britain and France wanted the most land. Germany was new to colonialism, but was ready to join the club. Belgium's King Leopold was sneaky and wanted his own private colony. The US didn't want war, so it mostly stayed out of the way. And the rest were just tagging along. One of the first rules they made was about notifying everyone when they found valuable things like gold or diamonds. But this rule wasn't really about sharing. It was about making sure no one else found it first. They also made rules about setting up businesses and working with local leaders, but these rules were kind of like suggestions. They didn't really apply to everyone equally. Here's the real juicy part. They agreed on something called effective occupation. Basically, if you wanted land, you had to have soldiers or officials there to take care of it. This meant that everyone started to rush and grab as much land as possible. It was like a game of musical chairs, but with more land. Especially a lot of land, especially in Africa. In fact, they were the third largest colonial power after Britain and France. But they had a big problem. They didn't have enough money or people to control all that land, so they did something unexpected. They asked other countries to help them manage their colonies. For example, they asked Britain to take over some of their land in Africa. At that time, everyone was busy taking land, so nobody thought much of it. But later, this would cause problems between the two countries. Now, here's where things get really messed up. King Leopold II of Belgium managed to convince everyone to let him privately own the Congo Free State. That's right. One king took a huge chunk of Africa for himself. Imagine your neighbor letting you mow his lawn and then taking his entire backyard. That's how crazy this is. This private colony would become one of the worst places to live under Belgian rule. People were treated terribly, and many lost their lives. Finally, by 1900, more than 90% of Africa was under the control of European countries. They drew borders that didn't care about local languages, cultures, or even homelands. It was like cutting a cake without looking at where the knife would land. The African people suffered tremendously. Millions were forced into hard labor, and anyone who resisted was punished severely. In places like Namibia and the Congo, entire groups of people were wiped out. After the Berlin Conference, the only thing left was stealing. After the Berlin Conference, Africa was never the same. The old ways of life were gone, and millions suffered. The Berlin Conference was a sad chapter for Africa, but it wasn't the end of the story. Many African leaders and groups tried to fight back. They led rebellions and fought for their freedom. Though it took many years, most African countries finally got their independence in the mid-1900s. This was a big moment, but it wasn't easy. Many countries are still dealing with the effects of the conference today. Conflicts, ethnic problems, and economic challenges often go back to those decisions made in 1884. Today, as we look back, it's important to remember what happened in Berlin. We should honor those who fought for freedom and justice in Africa. The scars of the past are still there, but so is the spirit of hope and resilience. Now, let's talk about how this conference changed the world. First, it made Africa poorer. The European powers took away lots of wealth and resources. They focused on getting raw materials like rubber, cocoa, and ivory. This made Africa a source of cheap materials for their industries, but it didn't help Africa grow its own industries. Plus, they didn't invest much in education or infrastructure. This kept Africa from developing and made them dependent on Europe. Second, the conference caused conflicts in Africa. When the Europeans left, they left behind borders that didn't match the local people's identities. They divided communities based on their skin color, culture, or religion. This created divisions that are still around today. Also, each country had favored one European power over the others. So when one country gained independence, they didn't always get along. This made it harder for Africa to work together and solve common problems. Third, the conference made Europe richer and more powerful. By taking resources from Africa, European countries could make more stuff and sell it to other countries. They became richer and stronger because of Africa's resources. This helped them dominate the world economy and keep Africa poor. And finally, the conference changed how the world works. Before the Berlin Conference, colonizing was mainly about trade and a few settlements here and there. But after that, it became all about taking as much land as possible. This led to a lot of competition and rivalry among European powers. It also caused conflicts with other non-European countries like the US, Japan, and Russia. Looking back, we can see that the Berlin Conference was a turning point in history. It marked the shift in world power towards Europe and the exploitation of Africa. It also shaped the way countries interact with each other today. While it's impossible to change the past, we can learn from it. We can work towards a better future where everyone is treated fairly and no one is exploited for their resources. As we conclude this journey through time, we must remember the lessons of the past. The Berlin Conference was a dark moment, but it's essential to understand how it shaped our world. Only by acknowledging the truth can we work towards a brighter future. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and share it with your friends. Subscribe to our channel for more amazing historical tales. And if you have any comments or questions, feel free to drop them below. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.